Shen Qingqiu had already taken his hammer. Did he intend to use his body to crush Luo Binghe? But as Shen Qingqiu took in Elder Sky Hammer's open arms, and his pose that seemed like he was about to embrace Luo Binghe, his thoughts suddenly made several lightning-like turns, and his entire body broke out in a cold sweat. Fuck me! He's still wearing the poison-spiked armor! At the moment of truth, subconsciously, he once again moved to protect his student. Xiuya left its sheath. Blade flashed bright as snow and pierced Elder Sky Hammer's hulking body. But the demon had an entire body's worth of brute force and all-out effort within him, and he didn't back down even when skewered. Instead, he seemed overjoyed, relentlessly careening forward, forcing Xiuya to run clean through him and out his back, his face stretched in a sinister grin. And he threw himself at Shen Qingqiu. Shen Qingqiu swiftly made his decision. He promptly withdrew his attack, but it was already too late. From his right arm came stabs of pain, and his heart chilled down to its depths. Sky Hammer collapsed to the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood, and laughed madly.
Shen Qingqiu, I've taken you down with me. Ha 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 ha! Worth it! It was worth it!
Shizun, Luo Binghe grabbed Shen Qingqiu's right hand. You've been pierced! Shen Qingqiu wrenched his hand free. Nothing's wrong. I wasn't pierced. Don't listen to the ravings of a blowhard. As he spoke, he glanced down, and his heart was once again blotted out by a frantic scream of fuck. From the back of his hand to his forearms were rows and rows of tiny pinholes. They were already turning red. Luckily, he didn't have trypophobia. However, once Luo Binghe saw his arm, his face went completely white. No one could hear the raging waves in Shen Qingqiu's heart. Motherfucker, how many times has the male lead screwed you over? You were already told that he won't die, remember? He won't die! Why did you go out of your way to rush and rescue him? Elder Skyhammer had finally dragged someone down with him, and it was a heavy weight.
This elder has never spoken on a disgay,
he said gleefully, no longer even a bit depressed.
If I say this poison had no cure, it has no cure.
A blade flashed. Luo Binghe pulled out Xiuya and held it to the demon's throat, his movements so matchlessly agile that Shen Qingqiu nearly missed them. It seemed suddenly as if Luo Binghe were another person. Your people must have a cure, he said coldly. If you don't hand over the antidote, I will definitely kill you first. Young master, Elder Skyhammer truly isn't lying, Sha Hualing interrupted. This poison is called without a cure. When it comes to humans, it indeed has no cure. The elder has lost his match and done something truly disgraceful. He knows only death awaits him. Why would he fear your threat? Without a cure? Never had less effort been put into naming a poison. Even though Shen Qingqiu had read the original work and had long known about this rare poison, he couldn't help lampshading and ranting at the pragmatism of Great Master Airplane shooting towards the sky's naming sense. Sha Hualing's eyes flashed. The sudden twist in circumstances had clearly inspired her to resume scheming something malicious. Shen Qingqiu nursed no illusions about her character. He circulated his spiritual energy to suppress the continuous waves of pain and twitching in his right arm while his lips curved into a smile, purposely putting on a mask of effortlessness. Your words are not wrong, but has Miss Sha forgotten that I've already cultivated for many years? Having achieved mid-core formation stage, can I still be considered a common person? Sha Hualing's expression tightened. However, it quickly settled again, and she laughed delicately. Whether you're common or not, I don't know, but I do know a method by which we can determine whether Senior Shen has been successfully poisoned. When a person is affected without a cure, starting from their wound, their spiritual flow becomes disconnected. This schism slowly spreads to their entire body. In the end, not only does their spiritual qi coagulate and stagnate, so does their blood. I asked Senior Shen to unleash a spiritual blast with his right hand. Then we shall see. A spiritual blast, as the name implied, involved amassing a large amount of spiritual energy into a single point, then letting it violently explode, using the waves of the spiritual energy's powerful oscillations as an attack. The effect was similar to pulling a trigger and firing a bullet or hurling a detonator. It seemed that in reality the impact depended on the cultivation of the user. Shen Qingqiu had attempted it privately himself and had been able to achieve an effect equivalent to throwing a grenade. But now, his right arm was akin to intricate robots whose part had short-circuited. Nevertheless, he exerted himself, but his spiritual flow had been completely cut off. God damn it, he couldn't have been crippled just like that, right? Upon hearing the description of without a cure, Luo Binghe's lips trembled. In this moment, all the wrongs Shen Qingqiu had committed against him in the past were wiped clean from his heart. The only thing he knew with absolute clarity was that the demons had harmed his teacher to the point that he might be crippled, he might even lose his life, and all because of him. Shen Qingqiu saw Luo Binghe's expression fluctuate, and he nonchalantly patted his student's head. No need to worry. Then Shen Qingqiu lifted his eyes, smiling slyly. There's no harm in trying, only I can't do this without some recompensation. Miss Shah, today you ran amok on Qiongding Peak, and I have put up with it so far. Now I've changed my mind. I cannot let you come and go as you please. If I do, won't Changqiu Mountain Sect be a laughingstock? How about we exchange a single palm strike under a contract of life and death? No matter who is injured and how, we bear all the blame ourselves. Whatever the result, we must accept it completely. Well? He couldn't show weakness now. All of Qiongding Peak was depending on him, the only available member of the older generation to support them. Sha Hualing would be too merciless to pass up the opportunity if he fell. Best case scenario, the demons would destroy Qiongding Hall, then carry its nameplate and mountain gates back to the demon realm, and therefore their sect's reputation would plummet. Worst case scenario, it would be a massacre. He had no doubts that this woman was entirely capable of doing something like that. Better by far to take a desperate risk and make this one last gamble. He could totally take her out too. Shen Qingqiu hadn't noticed that, unconsciously, he no longer considered the disciples around him, whether they were anxious, resolute, furious, or indecisive, to be mob characters the novel had described in a scant number of words. Sha Hualing bit her lower lip, incredibly torn. If Shen Qingqiu hadn't really been poisoned, this exchange of blows would directly pit their spiritual strengths against each other, and she would definitely be killed. But if he was only bluffing, and if she missed this chance to wipe out Qiongding Peak, wouldn't she regret it for the rest of her life? Shen Qingqiu calmly regarded her. His expression was neither that of anticipation nor avoidance as he waited her decision. Luo Binghe tugged on his sleeve. Shizun, this disciple is willing to take Shizun's place and receive the strike. Shen Qingqiu yanked his sleeve back, expression unchanging. In what universe is it acceptable for a master to cower behind his disciple? Shizun was injured for this disciple's sake. Shen Qingqiu glared at him. Since you know it was for your sake, then put some effort into protecting your own life. Luo Binghe's heart suffered a heavy blow. He was unable to speak, but the rims of his eyes reddened. At last, Sha Hualing gritted her teeth. Then, Senior Shen, please forgive Linger's rudeness. Come, show no mercy and let fate decide who lives or dies, Shen Qingqiu replied. Sha Hualing's heart thundered in her chest, and she didn't dare respond. Her fire-red figure rose with a leap, and she charged forth, her snow-white jade-like palm billowing with potent black demonic qi. Shen Qingqiu kicked Luo Binghe aside, having made his preparations. With this one strike, he'd ensure there were no winners. However, he was not sent flying by Sha Hualing's palm strike, nor did he cough up fresh blood as his body self-destructed and killed him. Roiling with killing intent, the master of Baizhan Peak, whose sword had already left its sheath, without even lifting a single finger and using only the spiritual energy bursting forth from his body, blasted away Sha Hualing even as she was attacking with her full strength. After a short silence, Chongding Peak boiled over. Martial Uncle Liu has left seclusion. The Baizhan Peak warlord has left seclusion. You demons, let's see if you can still be arrogant now. The cheers were greater than the total amount of badass poser points Shen Qingqiu had painstakingly farmed up until now. A rain of tears showered down on Shen Qingqiu's heart. You damn show-off! Would it kill you to arrive sooner? How about you leave some badass points for me? What happened next? This world proved itself to be truly that of a fan service-packed stallion novel. After Sha Hualing was blasted away, she let out a single delicate scream, and the gauzy red cloth draped around her body that had barely covered anything in the first place also tore to shreds, eliciting a series of alarmed cries from the onlookers. She cushioned her landing with a beautifully exited roll, propelling herself to standing in a single movement. Demons were indeed bold and unrestrained. Even though her entire body was censored out, Sha Hualing wasn't ashamed in the slightest. She spitefully tore off the cloak of a subordinate beside her, carelessly throwing it over herself. I underestimated you today, she said. But we will definitely meet again in the future. Let's go. Liu Qingge sneered. Coming along and going as you please. How shameless! Dream on! His posture shifted, and his sword, Chen Luan, soared into the sky, summoning sword glares by the hundreds and thousands, which arranged themselves into a glowing array before stabbing downward, descending like rain and hail on the demon horde. Sha Hualing led her troops and fled while summoning a bolt of red gauze over her head, while she threw upward. Unfortunately, it simply couldn't block the fierce rain of sword glares. The red gauze was quickly pierced full of holes. On top of that, Changqiu mountain sect's disciples were hemming the demons in, so most of the horde suffered great injuries or were captured. Only the small heart of the group that had kept near Sha Hualing managed to escape down the mountain, thoroughly battered and humiliated. After returning his sword to its sheath, Liu Qingge turned, stone-faced, to examine the condition of the wound on Shen Qingqiu's arm. The Qingjing Peak's disciples also came to surround them, more than 10 faces, all filled with the same anxious expression. Shen Qingqiu sighed. It definitely was the right decision to send Ying Ying and pound on the walls of Lingxi caves, wailing until you came out. So, how am I? Liu Qingge humphed. You won't die for now. Though he said this, he didn't stop sending spiritual energy into Shen Qingqiu's body through his left hand, and his expression became increasingly grave. Shen Qingqiu looked at his hand, and Liu Qingge emphatically clarified, I'm just repaying my debt from Lingxi caves. So damn tsundere. His plan to recruit Liu Qingge as a teammate had promise, but the meridians of Shen Qingqiu's entire body subsequently underwent a series of convulsions, and he was unable to smile. Martial Uncle Liu, does a poison without a cure truly have no cure? Luo Binghe asked. Liu Qingge glanced at him, but before he could answer, Shen Qingqiu's knees wobbled and he almost fell into a kneel. Luckily, Luo Binghe had been supporting him the entire time, but Shen Qingqiu really couldn't stand anymore. He waved his hand. Let me lie down for a while. Luo Binghe had never seen Shen Qingqiu so weak. He knelt beside Shen Qingqiu with bloodshot eyes, choking on sobs. Shizun. With great difficulty, Shen Qingqiu lifted an arm and patted Binghe's head like he'd always wanted to. The mouthful of fresh blood he'd been holding back finally spilled falteringly forth. Even if it was going to be like this, he persisted and tenaciously offered a crucial line to far more favor. I knew that. You definitely win. Upon hearing this, a tremor traveled through Luo Binghe's entire body. Thinking about it afterward, Shen Qingqiu concluded that if he'd been looking at this from an omniscient reader's point of view, he'd have had an outburst, smashing the book down and cursing. What the fuck is with this character, huh? hurting him one moment and saving him the next. He's messed up in the head, multiple personalities, nut job. At this time, the system sent a notification. Shen Qingqiu's character complexity rating plus 20, character depth plus 20, character suspense plus 10, total B points plus 50. Shen Qingqiu was horrified. This was how character depth was calculated? Also, please don't randomly create strange point types, thank you. His vision going dark, Shen Qingqiu lifted his head, and he thought he saw Luo Binghe's tears falling down from his eyes like pearls. He had to be mistaken. That was his last thought before he lost consciousness.